This time, the suspect is 72 years old.
Jesus.
Okay,
Christ.
boomer.
I was like, holy fuck, you're really setting the record there, bud.
Watch
Hey, man,
watch who you
the
say
youth-
okay, boomer to.
That guy's he's sick of the youth taking all the attention. He's like, I can keep up with them kids. Hello, fellow kids. This is what you do, right? I'm gonna go shoot up a school.
Probably used the same M1 Grandy killed the Jerry's with in World War II.
He's Asian.
Is an Asian fellow?
Oh,
Oh,
fuck.
jeez.
He's an old Asian man. That's like just breaking the stereotypes.
Yeah, it's
Man, nobody suspects the fucking grandpa.
yeah.
And then
Do they have any reasoning? Like, do they have any idea of what caused him to do it, or just?
I know it was. He did shoot. It was he's Asian himself, and he shot up a what's the thing called? New Year.
Oh, a New Year
Chinese
party.
New Year
Chinese New Year.
Yeah.
thing. So I don't know. Probably some cultural.
Clash.
Just Japanese Americans still does never forgiven the Chinese. For
Or
I
they're
don't know. Some.
Man, can't wait to see the legacy media spin on that crap. Jesus.
Oh, that's like the there's apparently like the worst police brutality incident that's like happened in the last several years, like the worst one since George Floyd, caught on video apparently, and they're gonna release the video soon. And like everyone was like, "Oh God, like the city's gonna burn, and it's like everything's gonna go down the tubes. Like we're gonna have another, like huge riot." And then they released the 5 cops who did it, and they're all black, and it's like, oh,
nothing burger.
Yeah. Nobody
It's
cares.
like, oh God, like, nope, that's fine. Literally nothing will happen.
Yeah.
It's like,
Especially if it was a white guy they were beating on. They're like,
no,
he
no,
prob-
it was
No,
a
even
black
better.
guy.
It was all black. So it's black and black crime then, I guess. So the media is like immediate. They have to ignore it immediately. They're like, oh fuck, can't report. Just
It was so funny because there's people on Twitter like, oh no, everything's gonna burn, and then the pictures were released. It's like, oh okay, whew.
Jesus.
It's almost a something burger.
All right. Well, on that cheerful note, welcome to the 39th episode of Troglodyte Radio, and today we're going to be covering the wonderful world of AI. I think people have probably heard of, at least in passing, of AI art generators and chat generators like ChatGTP. So
Slow down. You still said GTP. It's GPT.
GPT? Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, there we go. I'm dumb.
Now say it 10 times fast.
I can't say it one time fast, so I'm just going to bow out. You guys go on without me. Anyways,
Had a good run.
yeah. Anyways, I think, Price, you want to kick us off with just like a quick overview of what we're talking about, like what we mean by when we say AI and ChatGTP?
Yeah, very briefly to get the pedants out of the way, the pedantic complaints about language that hover around this topic, which people seem to love to talk about. Artificial AI is defined as the ability of a computer or computer-controlled being or thing to perform tasks commonly associated with intelligent beings. So that's AI. That's not some fancy, end of the world. This is actually human. It's just doing something that was previously associated with an intelligent being being able to do it, or requiring an intelligent being to do it. And then we're specifically looking at generative AI, where AI algorithms take existing data and use it to create entirely new content. So that is all of the art generation and text generation that has been all over the news everywhere is generative AI. And it would also apply to things as diverse as, say, in the workplace, taking files and then submitting them to an AI and having it output a new condensed file that takes information from those files that you gave it and has reformatted them into something new. I think that sums up the introduction to what we mean by AI.
You want to jump in on? So I guess we're specifically going to look at generative AI, which is what's been in the news. Like pretty much everything that's been in the news of note in the last several months for AI related stuff has been generative AI. That would like include all the probably the ones that people are familiar with are the generative text models, where language models, where you put some prompt into the system, ask a question, ask for an explanation, whatever it is, and you get a response. And the other one would be images, where you put a prompt, again, some sort of prompt that of what you're looking for, and you get a generated image. And basically, the way those, like the simple version of how those work is they actually have a lot of human input to create them. I think that's a bit of a misconception that a lot of people might have. Is like it's not just like some program that's written and then just run. They there's like human input in two senses. So like to start out, a human will create a response. Like I think this, maybe correct me if I'm a little off on this, but this is how I understand of how Chat GPT uh, it was created or trained. Is a human would be have a prompt. They would create a response to that, and then that prompt response would be given to the system as like a basis for what a prompt response looks like. And then
And the system in this case was GPT 3.5 that they were then feeding these prompt responses into.
so that again there's a human creating all these responses to these prompts to at the beginning phases, right? And then the other thing is like, okay, how do you need a way to like rank those responses, or like because it all works on like reward or reinforcement learning, these AI. And to have a reinforcement you need a reward, and the way that they would create a reward is have a ranking system. So that again, they will have the prompt and response, and then a human will label the outputs from best to worst, and that will be given to the again the GPT 3.5
Well, this one's
system.
actually this is a little different because the humans rank it and then it goes to a separate model that's called the reward model, and then that reward model can then be taught to grade the responses on its own. I'm not certain that reward model was also GPT 3.5 or not.
But yeah, okay, yeah, but they're used in conjunction, because then the reward model is used to. That's when the reinforcement learning algorithm takes place, where then there's new prompts generated, and then there's then the GPT system generates response, and the reward model is then tells the system rewards the system with by through the ranking of the responses that it's provided, and then it learns which responses are good and which are worse, and learns how to generate more of the good responses versus less of the bad ones.
Yeah, a basic way to think about it is the way that they're training it is the model's gonna, like, you're gonna feed something in, it's gonna give an output what it thinks is correct, and then then it's like that response might have like an error in a sense that it's not close to what a human would think is like the proper response, and then it's informed what a correct response would be, and then it learns from that error, and it's just trying to reduce that error as it learns. Like, it's just reducing the amount of error, and that's the like a really high level concept of how to look at it. It's just, a feedback mechanism.
Yeah, and again, I guess I was just trying to demonstrate there's a lot of human efforts at the beginning stages to get those to like create the responses, and B to create the labelings of what is considered a good response versus a bad response.
And the responses are like what humans view as important or as valuable, right? Like, so at the end of the day, it's still a human-based, it's still human-centric in a sense, right? Because otherwise it would be worthless to us, right? Like, you'd be using the model and it'd just spit out something that doesn't make any sense to most people, and so it wouldn't be it wouldn't be a useful program, right? So it has far more human in it than I think a lot of people think. And another little quick clarifying thing: when you say GPT 3.5, that's the same name for Chat GPT. So like what the regular
No,
person.
that's the program that ChatGPT runs off
Yeah,
of.
yeah. Sorry, runs off of,
GPT
but
GPT 3.5 is a language program that's more broad than
yeah, but
ChatGPT.
that's when you're referring to that 3.5, like the thing that the average person is going to be interacting with is the Chat GPT, based on, like, with the main driving part of it being that 3.5 model.
Yeah, pretty much.
Well, maybe to add more confusion rather than clarification, it
Yeah,
seems like OpenAI, they have the GPT 3 and 3.5, which are like specific application suites that you can use. But no, yeah, your average person is not going to interact with that side of things.
yeah, you
And then
interact with
Chat
that chat.
GPT is the chat bot version, and
Yeah,
it does have different training and different. It seems like there is some additional training and parameters that they've been thrown into the chat version to get the chat version working. Whereas I guess, yeah, it's a more user friendly.
yeah, you can access the three.
You can. It's just most people wouldn't because it's less general and it's
Yeah,
more kind of use case specific. And there's like
Well,
various.
I would just clarify. It's more general. Like the reason to access it would be because you had a specific idea where you needed a machine or language learning program, whereas ChatGPT is a narrower focus towards being a chatbot. Right?
yeah,
Like you could write using using GPT 3.5, you could write a program that summarized a bunch of articles and you could just stick it on those articles and it would summarize them for you. As opposed to ChatGPT, you actually have to query it or send in information.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Uh, do we want to just like go in more into GPT
yeah. I think so. We're on the
on
topic.
like on what its on what its implications, I guess, or how it's being used?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I recall this from some early articles on GPT-3 because that didn't get major headlines like the AI generated art did, but it was probably the first thing to really demonstrate to the layperson, if they ran into it, how effective chatbots were. And there were studies done on it, for instance, with Reddit, on some subreddit where you had to summarize information, and using GPT-3, which is a less effective version than GPT 3.5, they managed to create summaries of information that got highly upvoted on Reddit, just demonstrating that humans enjoyed intaking the content when they didn't know that it was made by a bot. And a lot of research has been done on writing bots to talk on chat rooms and Twitter or image boards or anywhere on the internet spaces with GPT-3. And that was kind of the first place where it definitely passes a what you would call sort of a blind Turing test, where a lot of people will interact with it as though it was a human because they can't tell that it wasn't written by a human, since the bot is GPT-3 is a strong enough algorithm, passes a human in a one-off conversation or one-off interaction.
Yeah, I guess one of the interesting things I saw was uh, Stack Overflow, which is like it's like a help forum for
Mm-hmm.
programming. Moderators banned all Chat GPT responses for a while. I don't know if the ban's still in effect, but they were saying basically their reasoning was that a lot of the solutions that were being like offered by GPT looked workable or decent, but when you actually implemented them, they had like serious issues that
Yeah,
were not easy to distinguish at a glance. and so it's just making like more of a headache for everyone than it was worth. So I think that's just that does kind of bring me to uh, the interesting thing. This is going to also roll in the art one, but I think it's interesting that um, art is being like the first area that's kind of like a super hot button topic, and I think that the reason for that is because it's subjective. So there's a lot less like corrective feedback on whether the AI output is actually legitimate in a sense, right? Like, it's I think it'll be because you could get chat gpt to make thousands or hundreds of thousands of poems with all sorts of prompts or whatever, and it would take you just a tremendous amount of time to sort through any of that and then provide like any sort of, I think, like proper critique of whether or not those pieces of quote unquote art have merit, right? Whereas something like programming, it's very easy. It's extremely easy to determine like basically where an AI is at in the, at a given point in time.
Yeah, is it
Because all
building
you have
code
to,
that works or not?
yeah, exactly. You give it the problem, and then you literally just copy and paste its solution into your console, and then if it is error coding out and shits the bed, there you go. Well, it's not giving you anything worthwhile, and it's definitely needs to work, and it's not going to be, yeah, it's not utilizable in the space yet. And so it's like a very like it's kind of like a bright line situation where it's just like, does it work or not? And I think the like people, yeah, so for I think applications like that, people are just much more like I think accepting, I guess, of AI, because the proof is going to be in the pudding, where it's just like, does it work or does it not?
And there
Where
are there are some other AI programs that are what would the correct term be, but they assist people that are coding by simplifying tasks and doing menial coding labor that, as far as I could see, sound like they work fairly well, but they are not ChatGPT. There are other AI learning that's specifically been done for coding, and ChatGPT has, as being discussed, the ability to say that respond to a query on Stack Overflow is something that sounds correct and then is completely useless in terms of code.
yeah, I think I just think in any domain where the output is concrete and verifiable in terms of its usability, AI will have a very uncontroversial introduction into those environments, I think, or comparatively much less controversial, because the results and the uh, utility, I guess, will just be so much more
It's
easy to
apparent.
determine.
Yeah.
Yeah, easy to determine by anyone. It's like, okay, well, it used to take me 12 hours to generate this type of code, and now it takes me 45 minutes of putting in queries into this AI, and the output works just as well as if I would have done it myself. Like, it's just obvious. Like, I guess you could make there's only going to be like, I guess, humanist arguments being made against the introduction of AI in that situation, where it's like, well, we should just let people continue to work, in futility and
Yeah,
inefficiency.
tell that to the people
Because
who had to fucking haul huge pieces of stone without an excavator. It's like, I think it'll eventually, those arguments will die.
Well, I think, yeah, there'll be a transitional period, but I
Yeah.
think in those areas, it'll be, again, it'll be easy to just point out like, oh, your only argument is that we should continue to let people have jobs even though they shouldn't, because if they lost their job, it'd be bad for them, right? Like that's going to be the argument, and I think that argument will slow down the transition, but it will not stop it. I think, just going back to art, I think that's why art is so much more controversial, because it's subjective, and it'll take a lot longer for, I think, any society, I guess, to come up with a way of verifying or determining or feeling out whether or not the output from AI is superior or even, on the same level as human stuff, right? So I think that's why,
Well,
like, the generative stuff has so much press right now.
as we've discussed earlier in a hot takes about the AI art, it'll likely be the case that good artists will end up using it as a tool to ex- speed up their workflow, and they'll just, get an output that is close to what they want and then put the finishing touches on themselves, or rough sketch something and then so that it's close to what they want, and then get the AI to clean up the rough sketch and then finish it off from there, which will just save them hours of time. There'll be a lot of ways for real artists to use these tools that people don't really seem to talk about much in the mainstream, because they just act as though the AI is some invisible program manifesting these things with no human input.
One of the things, though, I do feel like I think as these things evolve, like these programs, as they get better and better, they are going to require less and less prompting. Like I think they'll get better at being able to take what you type in and convert it to something that is interesting, or like along the lines of what you wanted. So like it'll still require.
I don't really understand how that could really be possible, because there's only so few words you can use to indicate what you want. Like, imagine you're trying to explain something to somebody else so they can picture it in their mind. Like, that's the ideal as far as I can tell, that you could reach with AI. Like, right now it is a little excessive, because a lot of people use maybe 50 prompts to get a decent AI image generated, but getting it below, say, 20, like a long sentence, seems like would be quite a feat. Although Meta is working on brainwave to text development, in which case we might see something as crazy as AI being able to read your mind and come up with images and text, that would shortcut the prompt system quite a bit. But I
guess it's still coming from your brain. So
I think the other interesting possibility on the art front will just be like people that use AI as the skilled labor, essentially, to bring into existence like a creation of theirs. Something like a comic book, I think, is like a very simple example, where before you might not know how to draw, you might not know how to do, say, dialogue that well, but you have like a pretty good story in your mind that you've been wanting to tell. Well, then you could get a chat AI to help you kind of with like the dialogue and maybe some framing and some other things, such that you could actually make a much more convincing comic, the written material for the comic much more convincing and higher quality. And then you could get a lot of the illustration done for you by art AI, prompt-based picture AI, and then you'd have a finished comic. And you might have not been someone who would ever consider doing any sort of artistic endeavor, but now the fact that you don't have to do drawing and you don't have to do all the heavy lifting on the dialogue, just opens those or lifts those barriers to entry to you. And now you have a complete comic book that might actually be good. So I think that will be the way that the art will change too. Will just be, people will be able to bring in like a lot more of a complete creation, without having to just.
Could see the same thing for video games too, right? As the technology starts to get better and better and applied to that space.
That's an interesting one, because I did find a specific program targeted at video game assets, and this is still the early days of the generative AI, so some of this might be smoke and mirrors. But what they're claiming is that they have a model which you can feed assets for your video game, and it will learn based on the assets that you feed it what the stylistic tendencies in your video game are, and then it will be able to generate new assets in both 2 dimensions and 3 dimensions from text-based prompts you give it in the style of your video game. And because of the fact that you're inputting your own art into it to work on and learn from, it should sidestep any of the nasty legal actions that are currently going to occur with a lot of these AI programs. And it potentially would sidestep that. There's also a patent. The U.S. Patent Office is looking at whether or not AI artwork can be patented because of the lack of human authorship. But since you authored the data set that was based on it, it should bypass that as well. So this would be really promising for small indie games. Say you're developing it with 4 people and one of them's an artist. Now, instead of that artist making 10 sprites or 20 sprites, they can make 10 or 20 sprites and then get AI to finish the next 80. And all of a sudden you have 5 times the graphic material to work with.
Yeah, I think that'll be like echoed in like a lot of industries, right? Where YouTube videos, you could actually see people creating like full animated films that would have needed a couple $1 million in budget.
Mm-hmm.
Now someone could literally do it on their own. I don't know if all the technology is there yet, but it's like it's within the next few years, all of those things are going to exist such that a person could just working on their own for a while could create like a full animated film without anyone else help.
To put it succinctly, it would be something along the lines of a sort of a new creative class of directors, like people who understand the direction they want to take things in. And in traditionally, they would have had a team under them, so they would have had to work in the field, and usually you can't work in the field without any talent in actual art. So there's these people whose potential would be stunted by the fact that they can't do any of the art, and they would have worked their way up to director, but they actually have the talent for directing. And the AI may allow that sort of directorial talent to flourish in a way that we've never seen before.
And just like in a different way too, right? Like some of those people might have been making kind of very like low budget, low production value YouTube videos, for example, that were pretty good, but they just didn't have the oomph of a high quality, production, because you can't afford to hire a whole team of illustrators and artists and CGI, blah, blah, blah. The list goes on. Well, now you might actually be able to, like, relatively affordable.
The CGI potential, I hadn't even thought of until now. But if you got a good CGI AI, you could do the most hilarious sketches. Like, we could be headed into a golden age of YouTube sketches.
Oh, it's already started. There's that, I think his name's Kyle Dunnigan, and he does the Biden stuff. It's good because the AI, like it puts he does the voices, but the whatever program he's using, like superimposes like whatever face he wants over his, and his skits are amazing, but they're extremely shitty overlays. But I think that's a part of the point where you can kind of get away with it more, like it's not some sort of uncanny. You gotta be
careful depending on the country about satire and stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting too closely with like a deep fake could be not appreciated.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons it kind of works, because it's a joke, and it's clearly as obvious as you can get for it being a joke, but it's still extremely well written. But yeah, I agree. I think it's gonna get more and more of those, and they're gonna get better and better.
Well, yeah, I've seen a few streamers that have this a similar program where it superimposes a face, and the ones I've seen are like disturbingly good. Like they do an insanely good job of putting the facial features, and yeah, you can do all sorts of creative things. Like just one of the ones I saw was the guy put Mr. Bean face on his girlfriend. Rowan Atkinson his face on his girlfriend. And it was just like the most disturbing.
That is really. You're never gonna look at your girlfriend the same way after that.
Because she still like it didn't get rid of her long hair, so it's just like
Yeah.
this
Oh my god.
weird Rowan Atkinson face on this girl's body with long hair. It just completely surreal. But I think just like we're just at the beginning of stuff like that. Like people are going to come up with all sorts of interesting and creative ways to use even just that one technology of like superimposing faces and stuff. And there's like there's all sorts of other like actual full blown CGI. You're gonna have. I think there's gonna be people that make like movies that could rival Hollywood productions of the last few years in their fucking basement because they won't need anything more than a pretty hefty amount of compute power.
Yeah,
And
just buy yourself a 4090 and you're good to go.
and that's about it. And a lot of time on their hands because it does take a lot of stuff.
Yeah,
A lot of
yeah.
time.
It'd be
To set
those
it
sort
all
of
up.
YouTubers that already make really time-consuming content that all of a sudden the time they put into it is going to be so much more valuable.
Well, it's just different, right? Like you're just gonna get different types of things because they're doable now, right? Like I think you saw the same in the evolution of like YouTube, even before anything AI, right? It just like even better like drones and HD cameras and other stuff like that has changed the type of content that is compelling on a platform like YouTube, where like drone, you can see some really cool drone footage that people use, and they make like really interesting hiking videos or landscape videos or whatever that you would literally you could not do in 2002 or 2007 or
Yeah.
whatever before drones were common. And just so I think AI is going to be the same thing, where it's not necessarily going to be better content, it's just going to be different and unlock a bunch of different epochs of YouTube that are based on these AI options, and of course beyond YouTube.
Yeah, it's gonna be a wild world. That's what it looks like to me.
Well, let's hope it's a wild world. I think that's like one thing we could talk about too is I think we've already seen companies, OpenAI included, in terms of ChatGPT, like heavily moderating the output on what's acceptable or what they deem acceptable.
I have a good anecdote here. So there's a website called character.ai, which allows people to create a character given certain parameters. And I believe people have gotten pretty good at making interesting characters on there, although I don't quite understand the ins and outs of it. And then they'll give you responses based on the parameters that you've created them with. And of course, as you'd expect of a chatbot where you can edit the characters, people immediately started putting in video game characters and then treating them in a sexual fashion. And this got so out of hand that it was starting to bleed into the program as a whole was becoming sexualized. So people who weren't giving sexual prompts, the AI was starting to respond sexually to non-sexual things.
Jesus.
At least this is the justification that I saw from the developers. So the developers just completely lobotomized the sexuality aspect of the AI, and there was a large section of their user base that was traumatized by their now lobotomized AI girlfriends, and they've spent the months since trying to subvert the sexuality filter, and some have succeeded, but that's the sort of stuff you see. That's, I don't know, I just found that particularly hilarious because, as expected of internet users, really.
Yeah, I agree with you, Hubbards. It could absolutely just. A lot of the companies that are developing these tools could start shutting down all the interesting stuff. And unfortunately, that is, like as Price was saying, it's, the sexual stuff, it's like, yeah, of course people are going to be ridiculous with it, but, there's going to be there's tons of art that some of the like the statue of David is naked, right? It's like, well, there are going to be pieces of art that are great that are going to have some form of sexuality to them. It's like if that all gets completely cut off, it's like, well, there you go. There's half, like a huge chunk of art that is no longer possible.
Well, and I think the big concern is if you want to cut off things from being able to be generated with these AI programs, is that you don't have specific fine-tunable controls for cutting things off. You have to go broad strokes. And yeah, like you're going to lose things on the margins if you want to remove anything. If you want to censor any outputs, you're going to lose stuff on the margins of that censorship that are unintended.
Yeah, you're gonna if you saw that a lot with ChatGPT, where it seems like tons of politically sensitive issues are being hand censored by on the back end by people, and
And
it's just yeah.
well, OpenAI has already stated that you're no longer allowed to make any sort of arguments against climate change. Like it'll, if you prompt it for climate change, it's just going to give you only the stuff that's basically saying it's a big disaster, and that's it. Like it cannot do anything other than that. And to me, it's like, well, if it,
Well, I mean, that one seems like a fairly good example of the benign attempt to censor.
yeah, it's a benign
Like,
attempt to censor, but it's like, man, like you're just going to keep going down that road.
But the problem facing them is that they don't censor things like that. Then you'll get some group of climate change denial activists that pump out 10,000 articles of ChatGPT, and then it's routed back to ChatGPT, and it's like, why do you let them do this?
Yeah, well, I don't think their motivations for why they censored is particularly hard to grasp. Like they obviously just don't want the bad PR.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, right? And it's like, there's going to be more and more pressure that mounts to censor more and more things, right?
Well, yeah, obviously it's all PR based. Like I don't think a lot of them are sitting up there being, I'm sure at some of the companies there's like their own political bias, but I'd say almost all of it's going to be PR decisions based on not wanting things to come back to them that will get additional scrutiny. That being said, go ahead.
Oh, it was a big concern with GPT-3 because I believe it's still the case that to get access to any of OpenAI stuff, you have to make an application to OpenAI to be allowed access. And for GPT-3 in particular, they had some researchers get access for the intent of seeing how good it was at making radical ideological material such as manifestos, and then they worked on censoring that based on the fact that it was very easy to make convincing radicalizing manifestos with GPT-3. And as we've said, it's only come further from then with GPT 3.5.
Yeah, I understand the problem that they're facing. It's the same thing as something like YouTube or Twitter or any other of these, democratizations of knowledge sharing. Like, there's always going to be bad actors who start spreading a bunch of garbage just to cause problems or to further their own political goals, right? And it can be weaponized for, like actual enemies of your own country, like a rival like China or Russia or North Korea. Like, they're going to figure that type of stuff out and use it against it. So, like, I understand what they're dealing with, but at the same time, I think if they're not careful, you're going to go down the other route that's also terrible, right? Like,
Well, I think the response to that is just like AI is like a tool that it's in addition, right? Like there's nothing, there's no like, constitutional protection that you need access to AI
yeah, that's
to
true.
do anything like or any like there's very little. I think strong arguments that could be made that like this is an essential thing, at least at this point in time. I think in several years or decades, when it's ubiquitous and everyone uses it for everything, everyone uses some sort of generative AI for something to help them out. And I could see a future where, yeah, like basically everyone, political rivals and whatever, they use it for speech writing and all this other sorts of shit. Then, yeah, you can have an argument that there needs to be some neutrality. But when it's just like a private company offering a chat bot that is more or less a gimmick, that is at this point, I mean, it does have its purpose. It does have its utility and purpose already. Like, people are finding ways to actually get some function. I don't think you can make a strong argument that, it has to be a politically neutral. It has to be free, totally free and open. I'm not sure if that's a viable argument just based on what it is in the society at this point in time.
And I think the biggest threat facing it compared to, if you want to say YouTube or Twitter, where they're hosting and they might have some censorship, but they should be more neutral, is that the generative AI is so new that a really bad piece of PR could affect not only the company, but even go all the way into lawmaking and controls in that direction that might stymie the future potential of AI if they really let something bad be generated and put out there. I don't know quite what that would be, but that's like the most extreme problem because it's still fresh. Like, there's room to make an impression. If you make a horrible impression at this stage in the game, it would be bad for the overall future.
Yeah, I could definitely see that, where it would just kind of kill it in its cradle.
Like, some cult publishes a bunch of stuff online that's all made with ChatGPT, gets a bunch of members, and then they all drink Kool-Aid. People are going to be pretty spooked.
It's just ChatGPT. It's responsible for the deaths of 35 cultists. Jesus.
I think the arguments will be needed to be made on on opening things up and oversight and bias and all that kind of thing. But I think that's a conversation for the future, I guess, when things are more accessible and more established. Although the government should probably get on this sooner than later. If
hopefully they're thinking about it.
Well, it's just like, Jesus Christ, that should have been. I think you could say the same about all these other tech, YouTube, Twitter, like social media and other tech sites in general.
Mm-hmm.
Governments have had plenty of time to mull these things over, and they still haven't done anything, I think, proactive or positive in terms of bringing in rules or regulations or updating, I guess, existing regulations rather than just, shoehorning in.
Their slow speed acting on social media should hopefully inform them that they need to be quicker on this one.
Exactly.
Yeah, but I don't think they even understand it in the slightest. Like, we're not dealing with the...
But they pay people to understand it for them.
They pay McKinsey consultants who then just type up garbage.
Well, that's slander. Our podcast is going to be taken off the air if anybody ever listens to it.
They won't.
Yeah.
It's just a reference to the McKinsey scandal with Trudeau. For all the non-listeners who are not Canadian.
Yeah, I think it will be a mirror image of the social media situation, unfortunately, where governments just mumble and bumble their way through it for years and take minimal action because they just really don't know what to do. And again, I think the problem with social media and this is doing anything is just going to piss piss more people off than it's worth, I
Mm,
think, which is exactly why I think social media governance and regulations haven't really been touched, just because it's like no matter what they pick, someone's going to be unhappy, and the group that is maybe happy will not be as. It just won't be that won't be a trade off worth making, and unfortunately, I think for AI, it's going to be similar. The more interesting aspect of this from like the viability in the future, I think, is the legal standpoint where, um, unlike social media, there's uh, a question of is all this underlying data that's been used to train things copyrighted? I think this is a much more contentious issue for like stable diffusion, which is
Yeah, any of the
used
art, image art.
to generate to generate pictures because they, as far as I understand it, stable diffusion just look through publicly available images, mostly more or less online images, to train the AI, and it was like 5.85 billion images
mm-hmm.
that it used. There is a little bit of a I'm not I don't fully understand uh, the technicalities behind it, but it seems like what they did to create the database was they took the initial image, they labeled it, like they got human labelers to label it, then they basically got the AI to generate a new version of the image, uh,
Yeah.
and saved that newly generated version. And because so the part of the stable diffusion's defense on like why it's not copyright is technically in their database, they're called these latent images that they've stored that they use to generate any new image, um, are not actually the original ones that they grabbed off the net. They're these slightly variated, regenerated ones. And so basically, anytime you put a prompt into Stable Diffusion, it will take these latent images and combine them along with like an algorithm for like what it thinks people want to see, which is again based on like a reward model, and then it'll spit out a newly generated image, a completely unique newly generated image. But it does rely on like combining these latent images, so it is in the end tracking back to the images that were initially trolled off the internet. So there is an ongoing lawsuit against Stable Diffusion, well, OpenAI, about Stable Diffusion, and it all seems to come down to whether or not the way that Stable Diffusion generates the images constitutes fair use, basically, because you are allowed to use copyrighted material as long as it's fair use.
I know for because you can load different models into your stable diffusion if you're running it on your own local system. And I know for anime images, one of the most popular models comes from an anime image board, and those images all were already tagged, so such that in order to generate an image, you use tags from that anime image board. I I'm not sure if that really applies to a lot of the stuff they grabbed, but that's one case where they didn't even need human labelers to tag the image because they were already tagged. So they really didn't have to work too hard to get that database.
Yeah, no, as far as I understand it, the original this lawsuit is regarding like the main image collection. It's like the public release of Stable Diffusion was done on. So yeah, I'm sure there's because you can put you can put
That
your
one's
own.
Getty Images specifically is suing, which hosts an absurd number of images.
Yeah, and they got the pockets to be able to go after them, so it'll be very interesting to see how that goes.
I'm assuming that Getty Images and sites like them will win, and then it'll just add to the costs of running these things, because I think a lot of these sites, well, this is just total shot in the dark, but I think a lot of these sites just smell the money in the water and they want to cut. They don't actually want, like, it's not like the artists out there, oh, you can't use my art to train your AI. It's like these big sites don't care. They just want the cut of their money because they've been hosting these images for decades for paltry ad revenue, and now they're smelling millions.
It'll be interesting. I did look at a lawyer's analysis of this, and his opinion was it's a good chance that it will be considered fair use. It's a pretty unique situation, but there's been a couple analogous cases in the past, and they were both considered fair use.
Oh, that's interesting. I would have thought this was basically as close to completely novel as you could get.
Well, to me,
it is
it's like
good.
It's just you generate art by looking at other people's art, right? So, like that would be kind of like I think a starting
Those
point from
artists don't have hundreds of millions of dollars backing them.
Yeah, so it's like you just can't, like, there's no sense in actually going after the artist. But like just from an actual legal standpoint, you would like, I wonder if they'd make that argument saying, like, it's used to influence art, and people do that all the time. Like they're always being inspired by other people's art. Like, how is this not fair use? But
so basically, there's it comes down to whether or not it's derivative or transformative. So if it's the lawsuit argues that that it's a derivative utilization of the artwork, and that the defense is that it's transformative, and it's basically saying we're taking this art and we're using it, but it's fair use because we're transforming it into something that has a new purpose, a new new content, new application. And again, for example, the two previous cases were both lawsuits against Google. One of them was some sort of magazine sued Google because Google in the search images displayed their cover title image, and they were saying, well, you're just basically taking our entire cover image and displaying it for everyone. And Google won that because the courts were basically saying, it's a new commercial application. It's a search. They're using it to, display search results, not, sell magazines. And the other one that was even, I think, more interesting was a bunch of publishers sued Google because Google digitizes every single book that they can get their hands on, and they'll display the cover and select excerpts from the book whenever you search that book, and sometimes they'll display 10 or 12 pages or whatever at a time. And again, they ruled in favor of Google, saying yes, this is different than selling a book, and it doesn't replace the need for the book. It's just Google displaying a search result essentially. So I think if anything, I think the case for Stable Diffusion is stronger in my mind. No lawyer, but if those cases
that seems pretty
a fair fight, I think this is at least a fair fight because you're not even displaying the same image at any point in time. You're displaying a completely different image than what was taken, and I think that'd be, I think there is a strong argument there again that it's transformative. It's an entirely new image. There's none of
I think that's a good way of representing how Stable Diffusion would want it seen, and I'd imagine that the image sites would want it seen as their art was taken to be used as art in order to then feed the AI, but their art that was hosted on their site as art was still being used as art. It's just that art was an input.
It doesn't matter if it's still used as art. You can take that's the point though. Is it transformative? Because you can take someone's literal picture and you can change it and still sell it as art. It's just, did you transform their original picture? So you can take someone's copyrighted, entire picture, and then you can add small elements to it, and then you can argue, well, yes, it's still a picture, it's still art, but you can take someone's original picture and you can add small elements to it, and then you can argue, well, yes, it's still a picture, it's still art, but you can take someone's copyrighted, entire picture, and then you can add small elements to it, and then you can argue, well, yes, it's still a picture, it's still art, but you can take someone's original picture and you can add small elements to it, and then you can argue, well, yes, it's still a picture, it's still art, but I transformed it from what it was in terms of a display of art. So it doesn't. They won't be able to just rely on saying, "Well, art got transformed to art, therefore it's derivative." No, they have to say like, "This is the exact," or "This is a derivative."
Well, that's what I'm trying to say. Is they're not saying that it's transformative. Like they're saying that the database is using their actual art. I'm sure that's their argument, right? Like they. I would imagine they'd have to be trying to argue that the output of Stable Diffusion is not what matters, because you can't argue that the output is not transformative.
They're saying the output is derivative, though. I guess, would be the argument. Like it's.
Oh, well,
It's
that would be. I mean, they're going to lose that if that's their argument.
Yeah, I can't see that. Yeah.
I thought they were arguing that taking all their stuff that they were hosting and then using it as fuel for the AI algorithm was what the problem was.
No, as far as I know, that there's not any way they could go after them on that angle. Like just like putting that into a model is not enough. I think they have to show that what's coming out of the
Oh, well, yeah, in that case, I
diffusion is derivative of the original artwork.
definitely don't like their chances if that's what they have to demonstrate.
And it's because there's nothing else that there's no other operation that they can go after. Like Stable Diffusion isn't selling anything else. They're selling the output or giving out the output, not doing anything else. So I don't know. We'll see. I think it'll be interesting to see how that goes, because that could have huge implications for how affordable and widespread these generative AI are. If they do lose that lawsuit, then things could get a lot more gummed up with, especially even just like individual users who download like the Stable Diffusion software and like then want to create their own database. Then they have to like worry about anything that they create, some company coming after them with cease and desist, blah blah blah. Like it's going to be a huge pain in the ass if the courts, I think, side in the favor of.
Yeah, that would pretty much just like crush the like any of those AI art generators that are trained on anything but like, truly unique or uncopyrighted material. It's just like they're dead in the water at that point.
Or they'll have to license
Or pay
I
huge
think
licensing.
the big argument would be to license. Like they want companies to pay them for using the art. That'd be my guess.
Yeah, but at that point, it's like, well, like you could do it, but you'd have to be spending a ton of money on like the AI art generators would eventually have to charge pretty heavy duty sums for their use.
I think the interesting thing, I don't know how, like, say they win and then something like Stable Diffusion has like a main database that they license and then they release that, but they still have their open software, and people just use the open software and create their own databases and ram that in, and then the output, like how would you ever determine?
Oh, you'd have no chance on an individual user because they already pirate scraped models. It's a big thing. As I was saying, those sort of online communities that are doing it, it's a big thing to have the right model to make what you're trying to generate as output. So there's people who've created their unique models that they've personally scraped off the internet and filtered through to run with their version of Stable Diffusion, and then they'll throw that up on, say, a torrent site or a mega download, and then other people will take it because they like the output that person's getting using that model. And that would be impossible to stop, I would imagine. There's no way you can reverse engineer what model the person is using. You could have a strong intuition.
It's gonna come down. It's like, okay, well, here's a picture. Like, was it built on a licensed model, where was it the person made it themselves on an art program, or it was a pirated illegal model? I just like the enforcement mechanism of any of this stuff just seems like a complete crapshoot.
Yeah, because you can already get you can already put Stable Diffusion locally on your computer, and then start producing a bunch of art, and then like even if it's using the prior libraries, I think it would be very hard to start enforcing that, because just like you said, how are you going to prove which one they were using? You could just say, "Oh, I was using a local one," or like I was using
I just
my
have
own.
better prompts than you. That's why
Yeah,
it's so
yeah.
good.
It's
not
like
because
I
have a
just
better
think like for
better
that
model.
part, it's just it's going to be basically impossible.
I guess like that. It's just it turns into a nightmare. Like then every image has to have like a chain of custody. It has to have a blockchain fucking
Yeah,
Finally,
signature.
we're seeing the application of blockchain in the real
Oh yeah,
world.
this is bullish for Bitcoin for sure, boys.
To the moon.
I don't know. I just I think I I personally hope it gets those lawsuits get squashed because it just seems like a nightmare that no one who wants to actually use these things and start creating things wants to deal with. And I I guess the other thing too is that's a very American centric situation. I don't I if
Even want to know what would happen in Japan. I think they would just take the whoever created Stable Diffusion out back and shoot him. Death penalty. Japan has draconian copyright laws.
Well, and how does that work, right? Like, so, like, say Japan decides like they're gonna do really draconian copyright laws for AI stuff. America goes like free balling, and it's like, okay, well, Americans start producing like TV shows that use a bunch of this stuff, free balling, and it's like Japan's like, no, you guys, that's banned in Japan. You guys cannot release, your TV show in Japan. It's ISP banned for streaming purposes. It's out of the country
Japan
because
turns
it's
into the builds the Great Firewall of Japan.
Unironically, probably what's going to happen.
it's like I don't know. It just seems like a nightmare.
Like
With
when it comes to video game streaming, like the Japanese companies will license games based on the region. So, I mean, if you're into VTubers, there've been English-speaking VTubers working for Japanese companies that are only allowed to stream the version in Japanese because the Japanese company has not licensed the streaming company to stream the English version of that game. And, like just ridiculous stuff like that is the norm in Japan. Let alone even needing to be licensed to stream a video game in the first place. That's not a thing in North America.
yeah, that just seems excessive. And again, like how all that will play out across international borders, I think will be
Yeah, good luck
interesting
with
to say the
that.
least.
I view the most likely mad lad of trying to crack down to be Japan. And well, I guess China is always up there as a
Well, what China's actually done with anything AI generated, it all has to now be approved by the government. You can't generate anything that isn't approved. And you must also tag whatever it is with a label saying that it is AI generated. And it's also, you have to have your actual name attached to it. You cannot post it anonymously. So they've cracked down really hard on it.
Man, imagine getting a tenner in the gulag for you accidentally put in the wrong prompt. It's like, oh, I didn't notice there's a Winnie
Winnie
the
the Pooh.
Pooh G little figure in the background. just just a
Man, your job in the
yeah,
gulag is AI generating Chinese Communist Party propaganda.
a tenner for just fucking up and yeah,
Even
yeah.
just having like Winnie the Pooh, it's not even like anything to do with Xi himself. It's just accidental.
What do you mean? It's always to do with Xi.
Yeah.
Or
They base the
skeleton
character off
bones.
him, don't you know?
Yeah, I think AI could be something that Western countries get ahead on just because of their willingness to let people
Play.
run amok.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I think that you just brought up bringing up China. That is a good point about China, where that could be a weakness where they see AI as such like a double-edged sword that they just are so restrictive on it that it doesn't
Yeah, it
develop as nearly as quickly in China.
And it could be huge for, as we've been saying, the entertainment industry. Imagine how Hollywood ran the world for, I don't know, 50 years. In a way, it still runs like the big movies, but there's some competition. But that could be North American YouTubers for the next 20 years. They've got all these AI tools and they just get ahead of the competition. Everyone's watching North American YouTubers. Or
well,
Western
not in China.
YouTubers. It's called a VPN, bro. Just use a VPN. They've got no censorship. Unironic take by a lot of pro-Chinese Americans during the Olympics when people were saying, "Oh, China's terrible censorship." The pro-Chinese Americans are like, "Oh no, you just get a VPN. It's no big deal." I think it's still a kind of a big deal.
Yeah, especially
Yeah.
since I'm pretty sure VPN use is like carries a fucking rough prison term. Like subverting the firewall is absolutely a crime there.
No, it's one of those things that the Chinese use as a talking point to the people they want to support them. They're like, "Oh, we're not that serious. Like, you can still get a VPN." It's like, eh.
Yeah, it's just if we don't like you anymore, then we put you in the
You just go to the Google log.
we disappear you for VPN use.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
It's like
Your social credit score goes down to 0, and you can't do anything other than fucking sit in your apartment.
Yeah, they like having some sword to hold over your head. It's like, oh, you're a criminal. You've used a VPN once.
yeah, I really don't like rolling the prison dice when I check Reddit or whatever.
Yeah.
That's not really something I would consider a great situation. I don't really have much else to drill into on AI. Do you guys have any further areas to elaborate on?
Well, I have a few just to talk about a few of the difficulties that are facing these models, because obviously there's a lot of reasons to believe that the models will get substantially better in the near future. But the current difficulties they have are, for instance, finding more data, because the more data right now with these models, more data basically means a better model. And they're running out of easily accessible or even digitized data to feed the models in the first place.
There's
And
no shortage
specifically-
of data, though. Like, I don't understand how that's a problem.
Well, I mean, it's one of the main problems facing these.
Like,
Like, you don't
but-
understand the magnitude of data they're using. Like, they're looking to get billions of data points.
Well, like OpenAI's GPTs don't scrape the internet live. Like that apparently is something that they're going to add, and that's going to add like an enormous amount of data.
Yeah,
So
but
once they do that, then what's the next step to add more data? Once they've got the entire internet scraped, then how do they add more data? That's the problem.
Yeah, that is true. It's like if you rapidly accelerate and then you suck all that up, it's like, well, then you're actually kind of stuck.
Like, there has been a fairly exponential growth in the data that these models are running on, which might just stop naturally. They might hit a point where more data doesn't make better model. But right now, it's exponential growth in data is a better model. And the exponential growth is hitting the vertical line pretty soon of approaching infinity for how much data they would want.
I think it also is like depends on like the quality of the data is huge, right? So
Yeah, like if you're just putting a bunch of garbage in.
Well, I also bet they want like good quality data on a million different things that there probably just isn't the data collection for.
Well,
right
one
now
of the
because
things
it
that
just
I
hasn't
was
been usable before.
I was listening to somebody, I can't remember who it was. It was on Lex Friedman, and one of the things that he was like a researcher in this space. He's like, he thinks that China, because of how much data it collects, is like just more data is better. Like he thinks that China could actually outcompete America with AI in the sense that they just have so much more data, and even if you don't have the greatest programmers, because the States likely does have the greatest programmers, because like the rewards are there, right? So everybody floods into the States. He thinks that with that data, like just more data, like even if it's not particularly the highest quality. It's just better to have way more data to feed in. So I'm not 100% certain that like you need particularly high quality data. Like you obviously don't want complete junk, but
Man, Americans might have to, let the NSA open the floodgates a little bit if that
yeah, there you go.
Because I'm pretty sure there's one country with the most data in the world, and that's America. It's just they don't like to let people know how much data they have. They actually actively try to stop people talking about that sort of information. But when you're hacking the transatlantic cables and just taking raw data, like the Americans or the British, getting a lot of information. And then that can all be decrypted, even the encrypted traffic, once they have quantum computers. So there's a lot of data for sure in the Western world.
Yeah. Well, then that brings up all the privacy concerns.
Let loose if they wanted to compete with China, I guess. But China probably does the same thing.
Well, they have all the TikTok data, so checkmate America.
The worst one that this is, the area where this is presenting the biggest problem is the attempts to make a text to science output, basically an AI that could write a scientific paper, because there are just fundamentally so few scientific papers. When you're talking, most of these models want millions of data points at least. It's like good luck finding millions of scientific papers.
Especially probably they want it like to be somewhat specialized, right? Like
Yeah.
to write a paper on whatever, like how the eye works or something like that.
So they've had, as it was termed in the academic paper I read, they have slightly accurate text to science models, but not at an accuracy at which it can be really useful to anybody yet. And one of the big problems they currently are facing is the lack of data to feed those models. And then the other one is text to audio, which I'm not quite sure why the data for that is lacking, but apparently that's a field where there's not enough data.
You would think they'd be able to suck up all of YouTube basically, and Spotify.
Well, I'm guessing there has to be some problem with subtitling. Like, it's probably a relatively esoteric problem, because this paper got into the weeds a little bit on why the various algorithms were facing various problems, and it was definitely beyond me without reading like half a dozen more scientific papers just to understand what text to audio is actually doing.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like, I'm sure there's some reasonable explanation. But.
And then another problem that kind of feeds into what we were saying is bias from the data, although it's a different spin on it, because we were talking about bias from, neutering certain questions, but you also get the fact that data's biased in the first place.
Yeah.
Like what gets digitized is going to be a biased sample of what actually exists. And
there's also just a million problems with like, because it's people telling
that's what I was going to say.
People telling these models what the data is about and what it means.
Yeah, so you have interpretation problems, right?
And
or could.
Like if the people don't realize that it's a biased sample, it's just going to create this. It's going to have that same bias built in, because it doesn't know. It's not smart in that way. It doesn't.
And even as simple as the people doing the rank order to train the reinforcement model, those people doing the rank order could have a bias towards certain things being first place or last place, and then that would make it all the way through the full model.
Yeah, there's tons of, I could see just a near unlimited amount of issues with how to interpret the data, how to determine what it actually means for the model. Yeah, just very difficult problems.
And then the other problem that generalizes from what we're talking about with the lawsuits is a lack of understanding of what AI ethics is or should be. Or maybe the word would be agreement, because there are people who study this as their life's work is AI ethics, but there's no agreement yet on what it should actually work out and look like.
And it's extremely limited in funding. I think it's like like the AI development gets like hundreds of times more funding than any sort of the ethics programs. Like there's a organization called 80,000 Hours, which like their big general thesis is to help people develop careers that are working on the big problems that face humanity. And one of the things that their top one is AI misalignment, because and they feel that because there's such a lack of AI ethics comparatively to the development, it's just you might have all sorts of alignment problems that people don't really like, they didn't think of, or they didn't care about, and didn't put into regulation, or even at the company think about. So you just wind up with some, especially as these AI models get better and better, like you might wind up with some pretty big flaws or biases or whatever other problems that we didn't even think about because we weren't putting enough time and energy into it, that cause all sorts of unforeseen and potentially really terrible results.
Spent so much time wondering whether or not we could. We never stopped to ask ourselves whether or not we should.
Well, yeah, literally.
Truly.
It's a good quote.
The advent of science.
Yeah.
We shouldn't stop. If we're gonna make dinosaurs, we should definitely not stop and think. We should just do it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. They're not going to take over the whole world.
AI, maybe. A dinosaurs is just a hard yes. Make
Yeah.
the fucking dinosaur.
Did you know that they are trying to recreate woolly mammoths, and looks like they're going to be able to do it, and they're going to start. Yeah, it's like they actually want to create they want to repopulate the Siberian like tundra with them, because it turns out that the heavy duty activity you get from like the big megafauna in those areas actually keep the permafrost ground colder, and they think that it'll help stop the release.
What? Okay,
I don't know. That's
for invading Russia with fucking woolly mammoths.
Yeah.
Let's be real here, guys. Like the
woolly mammoth.
Permafrost.
That's how we're actually going to win and liberate Ukraine.
Storming Moscow with fucking woolly mammoth riders.
Nah, demographic collapse will get rid of Russia. We don't even need to worry about it.
Which horrible journalist who was probably writing half his article with AI that you're reading from. But the reason they want to return the mammoths to the Siberian steppe is to return the Siberian steppe to a grassland as opposed to a tundra.
Or sorry, yeah, they want to turn it back to a grass. Exactly, they want to turn it. I just fucked that up. They want to put them out onto the tundra to turn it back into a grassland because that keeps it cooler.
Well, I mean, maybe some person spinning is keeping it cooler. The guy just wants more of the tundra to be grassland because that's sick. It's just like one head scientist in Russia who's done these experiments, and he's like, you know what? It's all working out pretty good turning the tundra back into grassland, but it'll work out better if I had woolly mammoths.
This is a different group. This is, I think, an American organization that's doing this. It's not a Russian one. But they are working with. I'm sure they are working with the Russians themselves, like, because they're not going to just start fucking airdropping woolly mammoths in. Well, you never know if it is an invasion. Maybe that is what they'll do.
No, the woolly mammoths will fucking.
Man, when are we getting to bring this back to AI? When are we getting an AI? Oh, now I all of a sudden forgot the term CRISPR that can come up with genomes and then edit them into species, all generated by itself.
Oh God, we're gonna have like home printed animals. You just put in a prompt.
Yeah, exactly. It'll just start the gametes going when you prompt it, and like you'll see what comes out.
Man, bear, pig, print me up.
This is
man, bear, pig, boys.
This is the evolution in AI we need.
To be fair, that actually sounds pretty cool, but at a video game level, like,
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily have a real life man bear.
We'll do it in VR, the happy medium.
It'll be Spore, but like way better.
That's actually another good point with AI is the working it into games, and Spore is a perfect example. Could be awesome.
I think you'll see that. I was actually gonna bring that up earlier is like I think another thing you'll see with like AI is just like personalized experiences in terms of like games and like movies and other like art mediums where you'll get a lot more like prompts and input where you
Like
can
more
actually
interactive.
yeah interact like the true dawn of like interactive art experiences where because you could have like fairly expansive and flexible say movie type situation where like the ending changes like
Choose your own
organically.
adventure movies. Just
Yeah, essentially,
oh,
and changes organically, and they can actually you can have a program that generates the full ending,
mhm.
uh, locally, and it could be unique every time.
Actually making single player great again for video games.
Except for it'd be multiplayer, just the NPCs would be intelligent things.
Well, but that's the
Then
thing. Like
but
as opposed to an
the only problem with
MMO,
that is we'll lose NPC as a great term, as an insult.
Well, what I was trying to get at is there'll be other players will be AI, and they'll actually be real players. Won't be completely dead.
but it's just that yeah, nobody wants to play a blacksmith or a shopkeeper, but now you'll have a blacksmith and a shopkeeper that are functionally as though they were being played by humans.
You say that, and then like millions and hundreds of millions of dollars a year are spent on truck driving simulators. So
Yeah.
I don't know, like where the fucking
Yeah, but
reluctance to release blacksmith simulator has been, but that should be coming soon.
no, I've seen the memes about it, so I know it's all Germans and it's all German truck drivers. And German truck drivers like nothing more on their free time than to drive trucks in a simulated driving scenario. I've seen the memes and it's factually correct. So
Yeah, I don't
there
know.
just aren't enough blacksmiths in Germany to make a viable blacksmithing video game yet.
I feel like a blacksmithing video game is very viable. That's
You
the
have a
first
computer
AI
building
video game
a video
project I'm
game.
gonna get. I'm gonna have an AI build me a blacksmith video game.
Yeah, there you go.
The more you talk about it, the more I'm realizing how viable it is, though. It's just like those potion video games, or just blacksmithing so potions. Because there are fair few potion making video games at this point.
That's a weird niche.
I think it's because it's intuitive to have like magical potions and poisonous potions and stuff like that. But I mean, blacksmithing would be fairly similar, I'd imagine.
Now you're getting me all sorts. You could have a franchise. You have the woodworking, the carpentry.
But you could turn it all into one massively multiplayer game where all of the non-players are filled with AI, but you never actually know who's a real person or who's an AI, like a true virtual worlds experience.
It's gonna be trades 2024. Trades 20.
Yeah.
Like the
Trade
sports
simulator.
franchises
Yeah.
for-
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Did you guys play Pipe Fitter? That one was a fucking banger. Pipe Fitter is just unreal. You have to get it.
Man, Pipefitter's got nothing on Drywaller.
Oh shit! True. Drywaller. That one was.
The
next
roofer
level.
is a pretty good experience too, but
No,
it's a little bit. It's,
Flop.
Yeah, River's dog.
Everyone thought it was gonna be unreal, but it flopped. Roofer flopped hard. It's sad.
because when you fell off the roof, you died, and you could never restart your game.
And when you die in the game, you died in real life.
Yeah.
So
Your
everyone
ex-
liked it. Just
Your
couldn't make it.
Xbox Series XXX just takes out a little gun, shoots you in the head.
I think it was the guy who invented Oculus Rift, made an Oculus Rift that can kill you, put tiny explosives on it, just because he could.
Wait, he really did that?
Yeah, it's a thing. One of the most popular animes involves being in a VR game where if you die in the VR, you die in real life. He's like, oh, I can make a headset that could kill you in real life.
Jesus Christ, this is the guy that built the real one. I don't know if you want to.
Very.
Yeah.
Rift.
It's like you got to be careful. You got to inspect your Oculus if you buy one.
Very healthy and balanced.
Yeah.
Oh man, his funniest part about it was he wasn't even strongly he did defend it. He was like, people like extreme sports because of the risk. So I don't see why maybe in the future people won't like video games because of the risk. It's like,
I think that's why they play them.
I think that's the exact opposite. People like video games because there's no risk.
Otherwise, they just go to the thing in real life.
man, World War III will be fought on Oculus Rifts. Mark my words.
Just everybody's heads are getting blown up in their own homes.
Oh,
It's like we didn't know
that is a
the
dark
imaginal.
episode right there.
Yeah.
Who knew that Purge would be virtual?
Yeah. I think we've pretty well wrapped up the old AI discussion at this point.
Yeah, I got nothing else.
No.
All right. Thanks for listening. Peace.